shows how. Let's say you were on national news, Ellen, and you had 5 minutes to explain this, the basic bullet points, why it's important, what the alternative means, going with the offshore bankers. I mean, if you had 5 minutes to just nail it and to crystallize why this is such a great avenue to financial liberty and sovereignty and freedom, what would you say?
Well, we still have a credit freeze on in all the states, and if you own your own bank, you can create credit, and states have a huge deposit and capital base with which they can leverage their money and create credit. So they could fund many things that we think we don't have the money for now, like infrastructure and education and low-cost housing. Plus, states are paying, well, in California, we're paying an average of 4.7% interest on our debt. If you're a bank, banks borrow from each other at the federal funds rate of 0 to 0.25%. That's what the Fed funds rate is right now. So it's an average of something like 0.2%. So if you're a bank, just for starters, the state could start funding its projects at a very low interest rate. And we've seen that, well, recently there was a lawsuit for these big banks that were colluding to set prices. So the states are paying much more than they should be paying for interest. Plus, we're subject to the rating agencies. You know, California, where I live, has a rating that's just hovering above Greece's. And we in California, the state has never defaulted on its debt. And there are the Wall Street banks, which would be bankrupt totally if we, the people, including largely California, hadn't bailed them out. They are paying this incredibly low interest rate, and we're paying a high rate because of our bad credit rating. So we could play their game. In other words, we can step into their shoes and get all the perks that a bank gets by being a bank.
Continue.
Well, I had started to explain about how banks create money. When a bank, first it creates money on its books, and then the check goes out of the bank, and then it has to clear it. And if the bank doesn't have the deposits to make it clear, then it just borrows that money back from the other banks, and it borrows at 0.2% interest. So essentially what it does is it creates money, the money goes out, and it borrows that very same money back. In other words, the pool has enough money out there because it just created it and put it out into the pool. It borrows that same money back at 0.2% interest, the Fed funds rate, or, 1 point something if they're taking longer CDs or whatever, but still it's a very low interest rate. And then they relend that to the states at, like California, 4.7%, or to individuals at 6% or something, or on credit cards up to 30% or whatever it is. So they're getting this huge spread. And if you own the bank, then that spread becomes taxpayer money. I mean, it goes back into the pool and feeds the pool. You had mentioned about the comprehensive annual financial reports. I was just asked to speak at a government finance officers convention about a month ago in Missouri. So I had a chance to talk to all these finance officers, and they said, indeed, that they had these huge rainy day pools that were anywhere from 20% to 75% of their budget that they had to sock away in this rainy day fund. And the reason was that unlike banks, which have this infinite credit line and can borrow anytime they want, states, they can't borrow. They have to go to the voters and do a bond issue. It's a big, laborious process, and it's never certain whether it's even going to happen. They don't know if they're going to be able to auction off their bonds. So it's actually happened in Missouri there, where a city would just come to a standstill, like there would be no money for anything, and the city would stop because they didn't plan their budgets correctly. So just to make sure, they sock away all this money in rainy day funds. Well, you can't, like in California, I know the treasurer manages $70 billion in a treasurer's pool of this sort of rainy day fund. Whereas, so the state's like $26 billion in debt, and we have $70 billion sitting in this investment pool. But you're not allowed to touch it because it's all earmarked for different things. Like Governor Schwarzenegger tried to get some of the highway fund money, and the court in San Diego said, no, that's earmarked for highways. You have to use it for
Well,
highways.
to interrupt, it's basically all rigged to the big mega banks, and now they've taken over society, and NAFTA and GATT has destroyed our industrial base. And now to cover this breaking news, and we'll continue with you in a moment, ma'am, world stocks tumble as debt woes rumble on. And the more trillions the bankers get, the worse things get, the less they loan. This is their system. World markets fell sharply once again Thursday as sentiment continued to be hit by concerns about the continent's debt crisis, and figures showed an unexpected increase in U.S. jobless claims last week. The worries left most of the world's leading indexes now trading below where they were in 2010. At the start of 2010. In Europe, the FTSE 100 index of leading British shares closed down 84.95 points, or 1.7%, at 5,073.13, while Germany's DAX slid to 120.79 points, or 2%, to 5,867.88. The CAC 40 in France ended 79.15 points, or 2.3% lower, at 3,432.52. Things got no better on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged 209.87 points, or 2%, at 10,234.50, while the broader Standard & Poor's 500 futures dropped 25.06 points, or 2.3%, to 1,089.99. The euro debt crisis continued to be the main point of interest in the markets, and fears are growing that it may prove to be the catalyst to a renewed downturn in global growth. There has been no growth, if not an outright slide back into recession. We've never been out of the recession, folks. 3/4 of recession is depression. While stocks tank, oil prices slid below $70 a barrel. The 10-year U.S. Treasury yields dropped to a 2010 low. Sentiment is awful and confidence has been trashed, said David Buick, markets analyst at BGC Partners. I mean, the issue here is, folks, it's only going to get worse. Like we told you 2 years ago in the last stage crisis. Okay, the stimulus money's only spent on sweetheart insiders. This is a criminal consolidation. We have the internal emails of Goldman Sachs. Either they are brought to justice and kicked out of our country, along with Calderon saying this is Mexico and he wants our guns. Either we wake up and get angry, which is starting to happen, or we become debt slaves. And they'll do it. They're experts at it. They know how to bring you down into financial slavery. They know how to put a police state in to suppress you. They've done it hundreds of times. This is hardcore information, and everything is unfolding according to their program. But the awakening is bigger than they thought it would be, and Brzezinski and others are starting to panic. Knowing how this system works, Ellen Brown, and it's one thing to know it's coming. It's another thing to now see it here and to know where we're going from this point straight down. Being a lawyer, researcher, author on the Federal Reserve, I mean, do you ever have a sense of unrealness yourself? Because I know I feel like that it's just so incredible, the earth-shaking events that are happening right now, and the public's somewhat awake, but if they had any idea just how horrific this is, I think they'd be even more awake and more angry, because I talk to so many yuppies who say, I'm glad the euro's plunging, that'll help us. No, we're going down too. We're all under the same global system. And it's people just live in denial about this. I don't think people understand. This is the beginning of the implosion, as bad as it is. We ain't seen nothing yet, as they say.
My book, Web of Debt, the theme of it is the Wizard of Oz, and that's the whole idea that nothing is what we think. Actually, the Wizard of Oz was written as a monetary allegory in the 1890s when they had a big populist movement for money reform, which is what I think we need to do today. They almost won, and now we've seen 100 years later that the bankers have messed everything up. It is time for us to step in and take back our governments by taking back the money power. We have lost the power to issue our own money and our own credit, and that's where we lost our government. So, yeah. In the case of the euro, all those countries they're all in debt. Now, how is that possible if they're all in debt? It's because they're in debt to bankers, which create their money and lend it to them. And
it's designed, the bankers brag, as a black hole to consolidate the small banks, to bankrupt the states, the nations. It is designed to give them total power.
That's right. And the head is at the Bank for International Settlements, which is now tightening the screws even more by they're talking about imposing, well, the
global VAT, global carbon taxes. Yeah, break down from your research the pyramidal power structure. Who's at the top? And again, the very bankers that engineered the crisis now saying, give us global taxes, give us total control, or the economy's going to implode.
Well, the way the bankers in general have kept a tight rein on